I'm very happy to welcome David Chien. He is co-director of the Chinese Alliance for Democracy and Progress. He was a senator in the Taiwanese parliament, and my Wikipedia tells me that he's a Chinese democracy movement veteran. Welcome, David.
The copies of an article which I put in on the Hong Kong's magazine Frontline. Okay. I have to apologize to our international scholars because the article was written in Chinese, but I will summarize the key points of the article. Professor Jiang Ting, Professor Chen Jianming, Professor Feng Chongyi, and Professor Hu Yanhui. And we also have two great artists with us today. Both of them are great sculptors. Mr. Chen Jian, and Chen Weiming, and Mrs. Zhong. And our distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen. The co-sponsor of today's seminar, Chien, asked me to deliver a speech in English. And he also reminded me that the focus of our seminar is the umbrella movement in Hong Kong in the end of last year. I believe everyone sitting here has witnessed Hong Kong people's courage and determination in the umbrella movement. And I believe we can say that the whole world are on Hong Kong people's side, except mainland China government and Hong Kong government. Though I said the whole world shared the concerns for Hong Kong's democratization progress, but I think as the activists in China democratization movement, we see the different meaning of Hong Kong people's democratization movement, which is a little bit different from the majority of the people of the whole world. I believe the concerns of the majority of the people of the whole world solely come from their conscience. They think Hong Kong people deserve democracy, and they sympathize with Hong Kong people's bitter struggle. Of course, we fully agree that Hong Kong people deserve democracy. But beside that, we view Hong Kong's democratization movement as a trigger to trigger the mainland China's democratization process. We have had this point of view since 2-3 years before umbrella movement. In the year of 2011, Chien and I went to New York to meet with the leaders of Hong Kong Alliance in support of patriotic democratic movement of China, which is Chien, the largest Hong Kong citizens organization to support the democratization movement. We went to New York to meet with the leaders of this organization because back then, Chien was banned from entering Hong Kong. So we made the appointment with these Hong Kong people's leaders before we took off for New York. And while we met with Li Zuoren, He Junren, and Mai Haihua, three great leaders, outstanding leaders, we found we all share the same belief that Hong Kong will soon turn out to be the most strategic place for whole China's democratization process. Soon after that meeting with Hong Kong people's leaders, Chien and I wrote articles to point out the significance of Hong Kong's position for the democratization progress of whole China. Chien wrote in English for websites like BBC and Radio France International. And I wrote articles in Chinese and published them on Hong Kong's magazine Frontline, Chien. Today I have prepared and dispersed the copies of one of my articles on Frontline. The topic of the article is the predestination and ordained mission of Hong Kong people. In that article, which was published 2 years before the umbrella movement, I wrote, if the anger of Chinese people to China government is an ammunition depot, then Hong Kong is the blasting fuse. If Chinese people's desire for democracy is a powerful engine, then Hong Kong is the starter. If China government is the strongman Achilles, then Hong Kong is the Achilles heel. I also wrote in the article, throughout 20th century, Hong Kong's destiny always sticks to China's, just like a poor child always stick to his poor mother. So we can see that when China suffered, throughout the 20th century, when China suffered, Hong Kong suffered too. But sometimes when mainland China went through the worst turmoil, Hong Kong served as the refugee to provide shelter to a lot of Chinese people. That is why a small island like Hong Kong has such a big population. Because in the last 1 century, so many Chinese people fled to Hong Kong from China, while China went through the chaos many times. Especially when Beijing City experienced the June 4th bloodbath in the year of 1989. People in Hong Kong worked together with greatest courage, and even the gangsters sacrificed their life to save hundreds of student leaders and dissident scholars. Today, even the whole world forgot about the June 4th massacre, but we can see that tens of thousands of Hong Kong people bearing candles to sitting the Victoria Park every June 4th evening to commemorate the martyrs of the June 4th massacre. Today, while Hong Kong people fight for their own democracy, they are actually fighting for the democracy of all Chinese. So when Hong Kong people struggle to save themselves, actually they are struggling to save whole China. And I think this kind of relationship between China and Hong Kong is the predestination of Hong Kong people, yet it is also the ordained mission, which is preset by God. So this is the predestination and ordained mission for Hong Kong people, which they cannot refuse, and they have to fight all the way until one day they can set themselves free and set all Chinese people free. But while Hong Kong people prolong their struggle, and while we all stand behind Hong Kong people for this great revolution in early 21st century, I will still try to offer 3 sincere advices to our fellow fighters in Hong Kong. My first advice to our Hong Kong brothers and sisters is concentrate on the democratization movement and don't ever try Hong Kong independence. Let me repeat that again. Concentrate on democratization movement and don't ever try Hong Kong independence. I think some people probably saw what I saw on TV in the parade progression in the umbrella movement. Some Hong Kong people, especially some young men, carrying the banners with the wording, "We want Hong Kong independence." or let's fight for Hong Kong independence. I have to say that Hong Kong independence will not only put Hong Kong into immediate danger, and the chances for Hong Kong independence to succeed is nearly zero. Let us look back at 100 years ago. Dr. Chien started his revolution by himself alone, as people called him the big cannon, Sun Dapao, because nobody would believe that this revolution started by a single man finally can prevail and win the victory. But I think Dr. Chien, the reason why he can succeed is because he had faith. He believed if one day his idea can convince the majority of Chinese people and make them join his side, then he cannot fail. But today, if Hong Kong people go for Hong Kong independence, it will create new obstacles, which is even more difficult to overcome for yourself. I think what we should reconsider is how can our will, which I mean the will of 8 million Hong Kong people, how can you confront with 1.5 billion people's will and finally win the war? Can you tell me whether this is possible? No way. There's absolutely no possibility. And that's why I have to stress here, I advise my friends, our colleagues in Hong Kong, our co-fighters in Hong Kong, concentrate on democratization and don't ever try Hong Kong independence. Because we should not go against 1.5 billion Chinese people. Actually, they are all country fellows. My second advice to Hong Kong people is try to win Chinese people to join you. So we should try to eliminate the hostile feeling to mainlanders, because we need them. And they are still our country fellows. In the last few years, I have seen in TV news many times that some mainlanders, they have very bad living habit. When they visit Hong Kong, they spit on the streets, their kids pee or poo on the sidewalks, which make Hong Kong people very angry. Very often, people from both sides quarrel on the streets or even exchange fist fight. But I think this kind of news report also escalate the hostility between Hong Kong people and mainland China and mainlanders. But I would like to remind our Hong Kong brothers and sisters why it is impossible to sever Hong Kong's future from mainlanders' future. That is to say that we are bound together to share the same future. So we should try to avoid the hostile feeling against mainlanders. Maybe we need more time to educate mainlanders. But we have to understand, if we cannot win them and make them join us, we can never win again. So I would suggest our leaders in the umbrella movement, you should teach all Hong Kong people that mainlanders are still our country fellows. And we need to make them understand our fight for Hong Kong people's freedom today is also the fight for mainlanders' freedom tomorrow. Try to make signs everywhere in Hong Kong to explain to mainlanders. While Hong Kong people try to save themselves today, they are actually trying to save whole Chinese people. Make that sign everywhere in Hong Kong. Make mainlanders see these signs. My third advice to Hong Kong people is, if bloody revolution does not stand better chance to win this war, maybe you should carefully study the non-cooperation movement led by the great revolutionist Gandhi. Because the leaders of the Hong Kong democratization movement should carefully calculate that the price of a bloody battle against China government may be too high. And the result is still not predicted. So I think you might learn a lesson from Gandhi's non-cooperation revolution. Though the success of a non-cooperation movement demands strong faith from mass majority to the movement leaders, but we believe that is still highly possible while we have witnessed the courage and determination demonstrated by Hong Kong people in the umbrella movement last year. Though we all know well this is a very tough battle, while Hong Kong people try to win democracy and freedom from a dictator regime, yet we still have faith that sooner or later people's will prevail. That includes Hong Kong people's will and all Chinese people's will, or even the will of the people of the whole world. Or we can put this in other words, as it was once said by Dr. Simpson before. The power of world trend is always irresistible. So no matter how strong the PRC's dictator regime is, it will eventually be overwhelmed by the world trend. So our comrades shall never give up, because we know the final victory is ours. That's the end of my speech today.
Questions? State your name very briefly. Yes.
Hi, my name is Ivan. I'm from Hong Kong. You mentioned that Hong Kong people should not seek independence. And my question is why? You mentioned that is because the chance of Hong Kong independence is so small that it's not worth to seek independence. And also you have gave some suggestion that the student leader like Alice and Lester to teach Hong Kong people to see the mainlanders as friends and to seek democracy with the mainlanders. So my question is, do you think there's any possible that we can actually make the mainlanders learn or embrace democracy at all?
You. And do you want afternoon tea? What we could do, if you were very disciplined, you could just put in a couple of sentences your point, and then David replies. So here we go. Please.
My name is Jenny. Thanks for the speech. My question is, what can we do to, as you say, educate the mainlanders
Okay.
on democracy?
That's a model.
I'm from Hong Kong, and from what he said, he does not support Hong Kong independence, and he wants Hong Kong people to support all the Chinese people because we treat them as a friend. But don't you forget, Chinese never think Hong Kong as a friend. In Hong Kong, Chinese always think Hong Kong is just a system to show the world. So what we're fighting for is what we need.
Question is a simple one. Why do you think that the fate of 1.5 billion Chinese people has to be, the responsibility has to put on our 7 million Hong Kong people?
These questions are very short. And then I think they are more or less the same question.
Yeah, in your point to Hong Kong people, you said mainlanders join the Hong Kong people, and that education process is it will take a long time. But the problem with that is Hong Kong is on borrowed time at the moment. We simply do not have that time to educate mainlanders. And that's neither our responsibility or our duty to educate mainlanders. If you ask the young people in Hong Kong nowadays, would they call themselves Chinese, most of them no. Because there's a fundamentally cultural difference between the two places already. And that, the crust between Hong Kong and mainland will only drift further and further apart. Last point, to talk about non-violence and peace. Gandhi was dealing with the British government. Martin Luther King was dealing with the American government. What do they have in common? They're dealing with men of faith. They don't have to respond to Luther King or Gandhi, but they have to answer to God. They're judged by God, so they still have a conscience. But our enemy, Communist Party, do not have a God, do not have a conscience.
Briefly.
I guess I understand the struggles of Hong Kongers because I'm a Hong Kong myself, and I hate to see the discrimination that's displayed by Hong Kongers. But we all know that this is not because this wasn't because of hatred in the first place. This was because of stupid policies. So in the context of that, in the context that the Hong Kong government will continue to make policies that will be unfavorable to Hong Kongers and, all that, how do you think, what approaches do you think Hong Kong should take in terms of thinking about that and changing their ways?
Thanks. I think we should maybe during the Q&A later, if that's okay.
Okay.
Briefly.
Look to me, there's pressure from several guests. Actually, most of them have the same pressure, which means you doubt the possibility to convince mainlanders that Hong Kong people are their friends. But and also, this great sculptor, he also mentioned that Hong Kong people don't have enough time because 2017 is coming very close. But I would say that I don't see the possibility that Hong Kong people can win the war in a short time. I think you have to look at it to consider the possibility this will be a long walk. If this is a long walk, you do have time to convince mainland, because this can be a short walk. The second thing is this young man, he said, where do I see the hope that mainland China mainland China government will finally give his people the freedom or democracy? I would say that if there's no hope for mainlanders or for all Chinese democracy and freedom, I can tell you now, there's no hope for Hong Kong people's democracy. The hope of Hong Kong people's democracy and freedom solely depend on mainland China's people still have hope for freedom and democracy. Don't you agree with me on that point? I hope you can deeply think about that possibility. If there's no hope for all Chinese people's democracy, then there would be no hope for Hong Kong people's democracy. I will conclude that here today very clearly. The third thing is, I find a lot of people consider Chinese people all stand on Chinese government's side. Actually, it's not true. I guarantee you. And that difference is to give me the faith that we can convince Chinese people finally. I think in the 21st century, in the near future of 21st century, I see a huge strength or power in human society, which is Chinese people. Today we underestimate that strength or that power, because today we see the mainland China government's power is too strong. But I can guarantee you, I believe so, Chinese people's power will grow. In next 1, 2, 3 decades, I think that power will grow and outsize China's government. And that's why I think we have to have this kind of concept or idea. We need to win Chinese people on our side. If we can win them, we can never win them all. Thank you very much.